Hi, dear listeners. This is Kate Riga. I'm here to make a quick pitch that you consider becoming a TPM Prime member. TPM has used the member model for over a decade now, and our loyal members are the only reason we've been able to weather the turbulence of the media landscape and avoid the fate that has befallen so many other independent outlets. For $70, you get no paywall, fewer ads, access to the Hive member forum, a members only newsletter, and more. For $140 a year, you get all of that, plus no ads at all. Without our members, there is no podcast, not to mention that I'm out of a job. Thank you so much for listening and supporting us. We couldn't do it without you.
Hi, this is Josh Marshall, and this is the Josh Marshall podcast featuring Kate Riga. We are back. It is August the 20th, Wednesday. Thank everybody so much for your patience. And as we can thank the president for, we've got a lot to talk about. We're going to talk about the occupation of the nation's capital, new signs of resistance to the president out in the states, Gavin Newsom, Texas Democrats, and the new series of President Trump's provocations, gerrymanders. He's going to take over voting in the country, all of that. But before we do that, I want to turn it over to my co-host Kate with just a message for all of you.
Yeah, I wanted to just echo Josh in thanking you all for your patience. I know it must have been kind of disconcerting to have us kind of go offline for so long. I am suffering through an unexpected, kind of sudden and very destabilizing loss that happened earlier in the summer. And I have needed some time to kind of start getting on my feet again. And it's been very difficult. So thank you for bearing with me. And, you know, just have some patience with me as I'm kind of getting back into the world of our current hellscape. So thank you for being such good listeners, and I'm happy to be back.
Okay. Let me echo again. Thank you, listeners, for your patience and for supporting Kate. You didn't know you were supporting Kate, but you were, and supporting us. And this organization is a family. And thank you, Kate, for your return. And we're gonna jump into it.
My
Um,
return from occupied DC, no less.
yes, yes, yes. Well, you will give us well. So let's jump in right there. Everybody has seen the headlines, seen the details. The president used this law to basically take control of the DC Metro Police Department. There's National Guard now. There's National Guard from other states. I'm not sure if they're actually in DC yet, but they're on the way. Let's start with a sense of, set aside this as a news story, just in your daily life. What are you seeing? Are you seeing this? Is it apparent, or how's that part of it work?
Yeah, my husband and I got into Union Station on Saturday, and you walk out and it's almost, if you didn't know better, you'd think it was like a one of those like exhibits of military equipment that they'll sometimes have, because
Right.
there are just, there's National Guard everywhere. There's, I don't know all the terminology, but, what looks like Humvees, like they're big equipment everywhere. And they're just, they're doing what police always do. They're just standing in clumps and talking to each other. But it's like the first thing you see when you kind of walk outside. And I think it's
So basically,
supposed.
they're positioned right outside Union Station. Just
Exactly. Yeah.
okay, in the little streets, that they access
Yeah.
streets and
And the
everything.
the little
The
kind of
ellipse,
roundabout.
kind of. Yep,
Mhm,
yep, yep.
exactly. And there are a couple guardsmen. I live in Southwest DC. At our metro stop, kind of posted up there, kind of outside our metro stop slash outside the Safeway, just standing there. I think it's the post that has a map they're updating with like which agencies and entities have been spotted in which parts of the city. So far I've only seen guards, but I'm sure our listeners have seen too, like there are clips going around of ICE in various neighborhoods. I know from the map that in my neighborhood, DEA agents have been spotted. There's like FBI, and then there's just these swaths of like unidentified law enforcement of some kind who are not
Right.
only covering their faces but don't even have like any insignia on their uniform of from whence they come.
Right,
So,
right. Well, presumably those are ice. I mean, I assume because at least when I see when I, that is, I mean, at some point in the future there will be like congressional hearings about like, well, what was the mask thing about? Like how
yeah.
did that work? Like who came up with the idea? And it does just with the masks more generally, it does seem like it started off as something that some of them were doing or they had permission to do, but it really does seem almost now like uh, part of the uniform,
Yep.
like it just always. So anyway, but I see, I've seen many clips of video where it's just it's just things that say federal police, DHS police, and these people are don't have masks. They at least have something. They have something that identifies them as police. They may maybe have a badge, and at least my understanding is, and there's actually something I saw last night that may uh, that may change this, but at least for now, the guard people are just there, like literally for theater. Like they can't arrest people. They can't really take any policing actions. But federal police can arrest people. DEA, FBI. There's nothing even that you know as with everything in the Trump era. There's gradations of strangeness. You know, as things go, that's not even that strange. These are federal
Yeah.
police. They're in a federal district. So, um, well, okay. So you see these people around. So what else?
Yeah, I mean, as far as I can tell, they're mostly spending their time, like, arresting delivery drivers. There's been a lot of that. Um, some DEA guys, like, swarmed a man who was smoking a cigarette on his own porch, and someone, like, filmed the interaction. I think that they thought it was weed, but, like, smoking weed on your own porch is also legal in DC, so it's just you've got
Yeah,
I mean, that's what's so scary about it, right? Is like you've got all these people who are not really like doing the jobs they were trained for, or, in the case of ICE, who the fuck knows who these people are, right? Because they're
yeah,
taking
yeah,
absolutely anyone.
yeah.
So you've just got like gangs of like middle-aged guys roving around in Kevlar vests, like looking for a fight,
Yeah.
and so far, I mean, the arresting the delivery guys thing is awful, right? But
Now,
there hasn't
arresting
been
delivery guys on the assumption that they're undocumented or that like
or
they're driving their
taking their
bicycle too fast.
mopeds, yeah, stuff like
Right.
that.
Right.
And, I've seen videos of ICE kind of going around the residential parts in Northwest, and they're, being kind of flanked by community members who are like yelling at them and chasing them out in some cases, or when they go up to knock on doors, yelling, don't answer, it's ICE, all that kind of stuff.
Right.
Um, but I mean, what you feel like Trump is gunning for here, and what seems nearly inevitable, is that one of these like poorly trained guys, right, who have already done stuff like pull down banners, or, one of them's on film, that people are saying you're ruining this country. And he's like, well, liberals already ruined it, right? Like one of those kind of goons is going to
This
get
is
into
an ICE
some,
person, some
yeah,
presumably
is going to
right.
get in some scrape with someone and things are going to get violent and someone's going to get hurt. And then does that provoke big protests in an already kind of strained DC? Seems likely. And then you have this kind of retroactive justification of the takeover. And then
Yep.
you're left what I think is an actual impossible situation, because then what should people do? Like, because you would have some kind of more pundity people telling you, like, don't give him a reason, right? Like that's
Mhm.
actually a big kind of debate going on within people in DC right now. Like, should you be mean to these people or should you be really nice and show that there's no excuse for them to be here or whatever? But like, if you get some kind of like Rodney King-esque scene, people are going to freak out, right? And
Yeah.
like justifiably. And you already have, we're in like the most heavily policed corner of the United States. And that's all just been increased tenfold, with people coming from all over the country. So I don't know. It feels very tense. It feels like you're just kind of waiting for the straw that broke the camel's back. 'Cause, I mean, look how they're reacting to the guy who threw the sandwich, right? It's like throwing the book at him. So,
Right, right. Well, did you for people who didn't see this thing, okay, so guy throws a sandwich at I guess, an ice person, and, like, this is like I guess it's maybe a more, updated hipster version of throwing a pie in someone's face. It's not fun to have a pie thrown in your face, but it's not injurious, right? Um, and, you're probably gonna get in some trouble if you do that with a police officer or a in the sense that ICE is police officers, but they are charging him with a felony. And the other thing that really struck me is he offered. I think I don't know if he's a lawyer. He's not. This isn't like a street person or something. This is someone with a kind of an established person. Um, and this person said, offered just to come down to, I don't know, ICE headquarters or wherever wherever you surrender to ICE, and turn himself in. But they did this. They insisted on going to his apartment like in riot gear, basically to like raid his apartment, and then they filmed it and posted it on like the DHS website or something like that. So all of the stuff,
and
and
he was a DOJ lawyer.
okay, well, there you go. I mean,
Yeah.
yes, not someone living on the street. Yes, I mean,
Exactly.
that's
Probably the best part of that video, though, for people who haven't seen it, is like this guy is wearing a pink polo shirt and like boat shoes. And after he hurls his hoagie, he's like what could best be called, it's a pretty casual jog away from the police and it or
right.
from law enforcement. And it takes them forever to catch him, and he is not very fast. So the whole thing is pretty comical. And now popping up around DC are like, Banksy revolution graffiti of a guy wielding a hoagie. So he is
You
our
know,
resistance.
I'm interested on this what you're saying about how to treat these people, and there's we've been in versions of this debate for a decade now, and you have the stuff in Portland and different versions of what people thought they were doing in during the George Floyd protests in 2020. um you, you know you have people, and I certainly count myself in this group, that protest and civil disobedience is great. Violence or destroying property is not only not great, it's counterproductive. You're losing allies when you do that. And then you have other people who say sort of, you can't you can't be judging the authentic voice of the resisting and the marginalized. Like, okay, whatever. Like, we get it. We get that debate. But on this thing of like, should people be obsequious to make anything that they do be so unjustified? And in a sense, it was not the strategy of the civil rights movement, civil disobedience, to be obsequious, but to be non-threatening and to be non-violent. And so you have these pictures of people who are not only nonviolent but performatively nonviolent, um, and being beaten or hosed or whatever by police. So that is a real debate, but the population of DC, whatever it is these days, I don't know, like about a million people, something like that, upwards of a yeah,
730-ish.
yeah,
Yeah.
okay, so quarter, three quarters of a million people. Uh, they're not all protesters. They're living in their city. That's different. That's a whole different sort of moral equation there. Um, and my take on this is like, don't throw. I mean, I love the sandwich guy, but let's not all throw sandwiches, right? Let's not do things that invite legal responses, getting arrested, getting whatever. But like, we don't want you here. Leave. And there's obviously these things are complicated. These are people who signed up to, like, handle floods or be sort of, kind of backfill in foreign wars, right? When the regular military is overextended, all that kind of stuff. And now they're being, they didn't, they, I don't, maybe there's some of that from the people from other states, but the DC Guard, they're just people in the DC Guard. They didn't ask for this. So that's another part of it. But I, I think, you know, I, I think it's a bad idea to be like, the idea that everybody should be, oh, thank you for your service, thank you for being here. I mean, come on, we got to be grown-ups here. This is wrong. We shouldn't well, you get the idea where I'm coming from.
Yeah, I think my two biggest thoughts about this are just one, you can't police a whole city, and I sometimes think that like democratic response, or at least response on the left, is like predicated on this idea that everyone has to be messaging uniformly. It's not that different from kind of the Sydney Sweeney thing. I wrote about this as an example, right? With the whole my jeans ad thing. Like,
Hmm.
Democrats were incredibly disciplined about that. No one came anywhere near it, but you had a few kind of disgruntled people on social media, taking what I think was a pretty, I think an arguably like distasteful ad, kind of writing our current cultural moment of, icky kind of like conservative mainstreamism, all of
Hmm.
that. And then, but taking it, this is kind of Nazism, this is whatever, which, like, to me, the thing was, I don't think in this current moment we necessarily have to go like dumpster diving in commercials to find evidence of like the resurgence of white nationalism. Like
Right, right,
our
right,
president
right,
pretty
right.
much wears that on his sleeves. But
Yeah.
they didn't get involved at all. And it still kicked off a media cycle of the left is furious, right? And like all the right wing places were talking about it. It's just like, if that is kind of how we are defining a successful response by the left, it is impossible to achieve. So there has to be at least kind of a backup plan about what if someone does do something that at least, you know, reads as violent, or the video is not good. There has to be kind of a clear plan to deal with that, rather than
Right.
just this kind of preemptive defensive crouch of like hoping nobody does. So
Yeah.
that's kind of my one bucket of thought. And my other is just, I think in the second term, something that went away that was present for Trump and everyone in Trumpism in the first term was ostracism. Like, people in the cabinet would go to restaurants and get heckled, and or people would get angry if a university put one of them on the board or something. And that has so dissolved in the second term, and some of that is corporate cowardice, and some of that is like the institutions deciding to just capitulate. But
Yeah.
I actually think it's one of the strongest tools that like a normal person has, is social shame for
Hmm.
people who are doing this.
Hmm.
So to me, I think people kind of, running into ICE on the sidewalk and saying, shame on you, get out of
Hmm.
my city. I
Yeah.
think that's fine. And I think
Hmm.
it's, one of the tools in a very limited arsenal right now.
Yeah, I 100% think so. And if someone does something, because someone will do something. It's a big city. It's a tense time. when people do something, it's not going to be because of the upshot of a debate on Twitter about, about ideal behavior. People get stressed, they're angry, they're having problems at home, they kind of act out, whatever, and it has a political context, but the reason they did it is because of, you get the idea. Um, I think the response has to be, yeah, we don't support that. But when you harass a whole city, just Trump is chaos. Trump brings chaos. And not be like, well, do you support it? All the it's I think it's so important for, whether we say Democrats, the left, blue state America, everybody on the sort of the everybody who's not supporting Trump, that part of the United States, to think to just say kind of like, you know, Trump is chaos. He's bringing chaos. We don't like chaos. We don't like what that one chaotic person did. Um, but also to say generally, even when things aren't bad, kind of like, we don't want this, and people can say it's a free country, and people can say we don't want you here, and that's just, we people should lean into that, and you can conduct yourselves in different, there are different ways to be oppositional. To my sense, and everybody's got their own sense, this is very American. We don't this is wrong. We don't like take over cities and militarize them and, like, shunt aside their local governments and, like, occupy them. It's bullshit. And don't wear masks. It's all bullshit. And I think that, luckily, I think what we see very clearly is that this whole militarizing ICE crackdown, it's not popular. It's not popular at all. It's not popular when it's sort of abusive stuff towards citizens. It's not popular rousting up, not, people who are undocumented. People don't like it. So everybody should lean into that. I don't think people should be worried in that sense.
Yeah. And we got to move off this quick. But the last thing I want to talk about is the reaction of the kind of Democratic leadership here. And, like, granted, DC is a little bit different. We know limited home rule, right? It's like easier for Trump to kind of trample all over DC than it is for a proper state, which, by the way, national Democrats have never ever taken the case of DC statehood seriously. It's always been like a
We'll get
fringe
to that. Yeah.
activist progressive issue.
Yeah.
This is the end result of that. Like, they should be, I know, and they're not. I know they're not, but they should absolutely be looking back in time to 2020 and 2021 and just, this should have been a leading issue. And not even because they care about the citizenry of DC, but because it's the obvious thing to do for a party that wants power and wants to win. And this is
Hmm.
the ramification of that. But anyway, Mayor Muriel Bowser, who's the mayor, who has, like, granted, like, limited power here, but she has taken the kind of path of acquiescence. She's basically saying, well, we do appreciate all the help we can get, blah, 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 which I think is, like, stupid and ridiculous. And people will
Hmm.
argue that she has a poor hand to play and she doesn't want Trump to kind of do worse things. But
Yeah.
to me, it's like, how many examples do we have of people rolling over for Trump? And when has that ever resulted in him being like, all right, you're good, I'll leave you alone and kind of move on to the next, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but I think it's kind of interesting and important because he said out loud, right, that this is, LA was first, right? DC is next. You can take to the bank that as soon as Mondawmin wins in New York, it's coming there, right? Like, he loves this. He loves kind of federal law enforcement pointing guns at people that he thinks are Democrats. He loves humiliating, state, local Democratic leaders. And he thinks, he knows that crime is a compelling issue for all time, right? That it makes for good TV, that, of course, in this case, when he doesn't want to be talking about the Epstein stuff anymore, that
Right,
it
right.
consumes a whole news cycle, right? Because you have law enforcement everywhere, all over a whole city. Like, you are guaranteeing clashes are going to happen, protests are going to happen, TV friendly, you know, violence is going to happen. So I do think that, to whatever extent that kind of mayors and governors who can reasonably expect that this treatment is coming their way next need to do what Democrats like hate to do and just kind of plan ahead a little bit, because this is all predictable now. We know what
Yep.
it's going to look like. And, I have found DC's leadership to be like pretty silent, pretty absent. Of course, this is
Mhm.
combined with the fact that Eleanor Holmes Norton is like a million years old and like can't speak in public. So that's, another layer on top of this. But
Yeah.
if I was the mayor here, I would be taking a page out of all people Cuomo's book of the COVID briefings and
Mhm.
doing a press briefing every day at the same time, where you talk about what's going on and what you're doing to fight it and how it's hurting the city, how restaurants are doing terribly and no one's going to bars and blah blah blah. And like, you will get attention because this is a big flashy splashy story. You are offering reporters something new to report on every day in a way that is easy to access, and you have iterative opportunities to enforce your message. I mean, it just seems obvious to me,
Mhm.
but they're doing this kind of like, no, 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 don't hit us. Like, we don't want it to get any worse kind of thing. And it's like,
Mhm.
the National Guard is now coming from like Mississippi and Louisiana. Like, we are at DEF CON, whatever. It's time to like, even if you can't physically fight, even if you don't have legal grounds to fight this,
Mhm.
you can fight on a messaging basis. And the total like abdication of trying to fight on that front, I think, is stupid. And I think just tells Trump that he can do this with almost no ramifications. People need to be told why this is bad, who it's hurting. And they're just, that has been very thin on the ground here.
Yeah, I always I 90% totally agree with you. I always have a little uncertainty with the unique case of DC. DC has self-government basically at the sufferance of Congress and the president, and under this administration, the president. So it's not even like with this, and this is the point that I've been, as listeners know, if you read the site, hammering on for a while now, the critical importance of the sovereignty of the states and that sort of sovereign executive power that they have. DC doesn't have that. So I always, you have this absurd thing, which I think is, as far as I know, still not resolved, where the taxes that DC collects from itself to run itself, Congress is still just keeping in escrow and not allowing them. The way that this story was presented back in March, I think it seemed to a lot of people that the federal government wasn't going to give the same amount of aid to DC, but it's not aid. It's the money that DC has raised from taxes on its own citizens that they're not allowed to have, and so that just gives you a sense of the ridiculous things that can happen, that can be done to DC. So there's part of me that gives her a bit more slack than I give state and local officials, because I don't know, maybe he do an executive order, you can't pick up trash anymore. I mean, who knows? It could, she's responsible for just those most basic things. But having said all that, I basically agree. He's not holding back. And this whole thing of, let's find the most right-wing states we can and bring in their national guards. I mean, they are entirely leaning into, this isn't we're not even going to uh play with the idea that we need to beef up law enforcement. We need to bring in outsiders and like kick ass here. Come kick liberal ass Sign up for the
Mhm.
Mississippi National Guard. I mean, that's basically where we're at. I hadn't heard that quote that you mentioned of someone said, "Oh, you're destroying the country like you liberals destroyed." I mean, man, I don't want to fucking hear from like a federal officer, a member of the military, that it's liberals' fault. I mean, that shows you. I mean, look, people have their own feelings, whatever, but like in any halfway trained police force or military organization knows you can't be having people say that on camera.
Yep.
I think we all understand the politics of a lot of people in the military and the police, but like you can't be saying that. Can't be saying that on camera.
Okay,
The
so let's talk about kind of how people are quote unquote resisting this kind
Yes.
of stuff. We're having new flare ups of people answering the call of we just want someone who fights, right? And the kind of main character of this recently has been Gavin Newsom, who came to the fore as part of this egregious gerrymandering gambit by Trump, which I have to say, I posted this on Blue Sky the other day, but it I still think it's a little underrated, the degree to which Trump just says things out loud, and so they're not scandals anymore. Like, redrawing the map so you don't lose the House is unbelievable cheating, like anti-democratic cheating. And just because he's willing to kind of talk about it out in the open and say explicitly, like, yeah, this will help Republicans and we want Republicans to win. It's just kind of like, oh, okay, then, right? But so part of this, Newsom kind of came to the fore because Trump said, Texas, I want more seats out of you. And Abbott said, yes, sir. And so Newsom said, we are going to fight fire with fire here. We're going to eke out more blue seats in California, where, of course, it's so much more complicated because that's one of the states where Democrats have kind of unilaterally disarmed and
Hmm.
done gerrymandering reform and have a commission. And now they have to ask voters for kind of permission to rewrite the Constitution. But that's how Gavin Newsom has kind of become a main character in the gerrymandering fight. And he has like followed along that kind of fighting posture with tweeting in Trump style, which I have got to say, at the beginning, I was kind of like, it was a little cringy to
You
me.
thought
I
it was
don't know.
cringe. Yeah, you said so. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I think that it has gotten better as it's gone on. I think the tweets have gotten funnier as they've gone on. He's like not just kind of doing the one trick pony of like the weird capitalization stuff. He's did the AI slop of, like the ghost of Hulk Hogan praying over him and stuff. He's doing the thank you for your attention to this matter, signing off with his initials. Like they've gotten quite good. Some of them are very funny. And I think more than anything else, they are making MAGA people so angry, which like in and of itself is worth the cost of doing business to me.
And and not just because people like you and me who we are immersed in the world of politics and we like seeing we like seeing a little of their pain, or not pain, their aggravation. But this is, it's funny. I was thinking about this when I was driving back from an extended errand to record our podcast. I was thinking about that because I think one of our colleagues posted his latest thing, which had one of those kind of I don't know what that style is, that with the sort of the black line kind of weird
Mm-hmm.
looking character. In any case, it is that is the that is the language that a lot of our politics is in, of sort of demonstrations of both humor and power and dominance and so forth. And I think it's not just something that kind of puts a little spring in the step of like, of news junkies. I actually think that is important. And I think um, what works in Newsom's case is that, wow, you've got someone who has some power, going back to that issue of states, has some executive power, and he's making fun of Trump. And people like, wow, I like that. There's someone who's not, who's who's going on offense, and it works, and I actually think it's it's actually an important thing in our politics. I think that that's something that liberals, Democrats, whatever, um, miss, that is a that conversation, that thing is a real part of our politics that it's important to attend to.
I also think a small slice of it that has been so refreshing to me is like some of these are like edgy posts a little bit, and it is crazy to watch the dynamic so thoroughly flip, where one of them was in the vein of like Newsom was kind of making fun of the Trump like ear thing after the attempted assassination, where he
I
has
didn't
like
see this one.
a pad on his ear and he's like holding ketchup in one of them, and like these maggot people are responding like, this is the governor of California making light of an attempted assassination of our president that claimed the life of whatever, the guy who was in the front row and stuff. And Newsom's thing is just responding like, cry more lib, like snowflake, whatever. And it's like, it's so silly, but it is so refreshing to see a Democrat acting without this apologetic stance all the time and this like fear of hurting people's feelings. And I know that comes from a good place. And I would much rather be in a country where people are too concerned about, hurting other people than gleefully delighting in it in the way we are. But it's like the bleeding heart stuff is just not where people are right now. And in order to actually protect minorities and vulnerable groups, you need Democrats to be in charge. And if the way to get there is to be kind of a dick online, I think that's a sacrifice we all have to like get a little bit more on board with accepting, right? It's in the same vein of like Democrats talk like college professors and that's turning people off. It's like, fine. If you have to give something up, giving up the stylistic flourishes has got to be the first thing that goes. This has to be about getting power.
And it's also with that thing about with the ear and the Trump whatever, there's that is a case, if like, let's say, I don't know, let's say there was a case of something that had happened, it's not really cruelty. No one thinks he's making light of the person who died. No one thinks that. No one thinks that. They're making fun of the fact that he got nicked on the ear with what was probably shrapnel, um, and he made it like the biggest thing since, like, I don't know, the conquest of Gaul, right? I mean, he's milking that for one out, for the last year or so, and that's what he's making fun of, and that's totally fine. That's totally fine. And so, yeah, if someone's saying like, "Oh, ha, 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 your uncle got cancer, sucks to be you." Like, I don't wanna do that. I don't want people, that's not nice. That's that's bad. That's not a way to, even with people you hate, that's not a good way to live in the world. This is not like that. And I'll say, there's another thing I saw in that vein was after California, I don't know if it's the Democratic Party or they um, somehow the map they want got made
Mhm.
public. And I mean, if you have a sense of the geography of California, it's rough. It takes, because basically everybody lives on the coast. And then you get into the coast, more agricultural, rural, or kind of deserty areas. It's very sparse and it's very conservative. And basically, they kind of put that entire half of the state in one district, made it like conservatopia, basically. So it's rough. But I saw people, I saw like the head of the state California, California Republican Party, a couple of the people whose seats are being redistricted, and on Twitter, like, this is so wrong. This is so deeply wrong. I see this. What have we become? And I remember, I think I responded to like the head of the state GOP, like, dude, first, sucks to be you. And second, maybe it's time to talk to your friends in Texas. 'Cause, like, fuck you guys. Like, and you see in those moments how acculturated they are to Democrats just being pushovers. Like, some of that is maybe bad faith, but if you listen to them at a certain level, they're actually shocked.
Mhm.
They're actually shocked. And they're saying kind of like, "This is wrong. You're what about our people in this district who aren't gonna be represented as, as fairly?" And it is bad, but, like, we're not playing but sorry. We're playing by your rules now, bud.
God, it just makes me wanna die. Like, I think Chuck Todd did an interview where he's like, "Well, this is just so bad for our democracy, it's a race to the bottom. Democrats should just campaign against this." And it's like, yeah, Democrats should campaign against gerrymandering, that'll win an election. But it's also just like, you people need to open your goddamn eyes. There are no options here. The only option is to fight back. And Republicans will probably still win because they control more state governments and they have less obstacles to like eke seats out here. But you absolutely cannot say, yes, sir, you should go into the midterms with a 10-seat advantage. Like, what are you smoking? Democrats are the first ones who would say, yeah, let's do universal redistricting. In fact, every
Yeah,
single one of them signed on to the John
yeah.
Lewis voting bill, which
There
would
is
have done that.
and there is no contradiction. There is no contradiction with people in California saying, every member of the House should say, bring up the and for our listeners, there's a bill that basically would create a national law that you put severe limits on gerrymandering. That kind of takes away the possibility of doing these kind of gerrymanders. If you say yes, we're doing this, and if I win, if you bring that to the floor, I will vote for it. Absolutely. And you elect a Democratic there's no contradiction. And all this like, oh, it's a race for the bottom for democracy. No, it's not. Democrats need to win to preserve the democratic character of our government. And the power at the national level is what over time will determine everything. So power at the national level is actually more important right now than whether the districts are totally fair in Texas and California. I will say one other thing though. I'm not sure Republicans will definitely come out ahead because the other side of this is that red states are already pretty damn gerrymandered. They don't there are very few of them that have any of these commissions. And even though there's the complexity that you described, Kate, where in California they've got to actually change the constitution to be able to do this, that there's a lot more opportunity because New York, California, a number of other big blue states are already set up where they're not allowed to do gerrymandering basically. So a gerrymander actually has a pretty big effect, whereas most red states are already pretty gerrymandered. I mean, one kind of interesting example of this, and I think our colleague Nicole wrote about this yesterday, that they are going all in now, trying to get Indiana to do this, and that shows you their desperation because the Indiana delegation is 7-2. Like the most they could possibly get there is one seat. And the locals are kind of no, we don't want to do it. And it shows you how clear they are. There's no possible way they can win unless I don't know they come up with maybe 20 seats with gerrymandering, and I'm not sure they can because most of their states are already super gerrymandered.
I do want to go back to one thing you said, which, part of this whole the race to the bottom thing is I've seen a lot of hand wringing about how the contradiction point that you made, like this is a difficult thing for Democrats to message on because they're going to sound hypocritical, blah, blah, blah. And I just think like, if Democrats can't message their way out of something this straightforward, I think that says more about Democrats than the difficulty of the situation. Like, I have no problem with someone saying, yeah, I hate gerrymandering, but I'm not just going to let Republicans steal the House. Perfect. I would love to reform gerrymandering. If Republicans would do it, we'd do it today. They won't. And so I'm not rolling over. I just don't think it's that difficult. And I think, like, you wrote about this in one of your posts, but we're seeing kind of Kathy Hochul be like, this is a war. I'm not laying down my arms in a war. Yes. More of
Yeah.
that. Newsom's thing too has been totally unapologetic. Pritzker's getting in on it as well. It's like, especially anyone with 2028 ambitions, but
Yeah.
Democrats across the board, it should be, this is a fight for power and we are not rolling over. And and you can even tap into the whole, right? Like our vision for power is a vision of a good, a vision of a multicultural, prosperous, whatever country. But to get there, you have to win. And so we are
Yeah.
going to do everything we can do to win.
And it's not even that Republicans have to support that. I mean, Democrats control Congress. They pass that bill. Period. Now, if it happens before 2029, Trump will veto it. But like, awesome. I mean, great. That's a good message. Like, listen, we are the anti-gerrymandering party. We passed the bill. We will pass it with the Democratic president, because that should be the rules. And it is an example of the inside DC concept. It's such a strange thing. The problem for Democrats is not you do polls, you do focus groups, you just live in fucking America. The problem for Democrats is not, oh, they say they're against gerrymandering, and yet now they're doing a gerrymandering. It is the deep-seated belief based in a painful amount of truth that they do not fight effectively for the things they say they believe in. That is the problem. And the weird thing, I was going to say that, with Chuck Todd being a sort of an exemplar of the DC mindset, um, you have to be deep in that DC mindset to think like, oh, this is a tough one. Can they manage the tension here? No, no one gives a fuck about that. But the funny thing is those are the same people who are always saying, yeah, people, but they just don't have confidence. Democrats, they can't get things done. They're not, they're too weak. They're so I don't even know. It really is an example that Democrats themselves have been, hopefully will not be any longer, so wound up in the DC insider mindset that not only creates bogus expectations of them, but bogus expectations on both sides.
Mhm.
Never be more powerful, never use power. There it's crazy making, but it is good that we are seeing uh that we are seeing Democrats like Gavin Newsom, J.B. Pritzker, Kathy Hochul, which again I've always thought of Hochul as the most feckless, accidental, ridiculous governor I've ever known. But like, if she wants to jump into it, great. And we're seeing, as you said, that if you want to run for president in 2028, you are going to have to point to a bunch of things about, well, everyone was just, kind of slack jawed and didn't know what to do. I was like telling Trump to shut the fuck up and posting memes about him. And to the extent that you can have a competition for that, great. Great. That's what politics is about.
And you know what else? Like, this is just really important practice for what we've been talking about a lot, which is if Democrats get a trifecta in 28 or whenever they kind of next get consolidated power, the steps they're going to have to take to keep the next Trump out of office are going to be extreme, radical, right?
Yep.
Court reform,
Yep.
filibuster, maybe, expand the House of Representatives, like stuff that even much more watered down versions of sends the mainstream media into an absolute tizzy, Republicans into a meltdown,
And make DC a
Democrats,
state. Make
yeah,
DC a state.
statehood for sure.
Not just because it should be a state. There's two more senators.
Oh yeah, statehood
I
for
mean,
Puerto Rico too. I
yep.
say
Yep.
bulk it
Yep.
up. It's a, and
Yep.
you can get into the nuts and bolts. You can get into the fact that like the Senate is so unfairly slanted towards Republicans that this is just evening it out. But either way, these are going to take big moves that will send all these different institutions into a huge fucking meltdown.
Mhm.
And we are going to need Democrats of the metal to say, I don't care. It is more important for to safeguard the democracy against the next person who has these kinds of authoritarian tendencies, which is, right now the entire Republican Party. And so we have the power, and so we're doing it. And you can cry about it, and our popularity might dip for a time, but I don't care. We're doing it.
Mhm.
And this
Mhm.
is a really good practice session. It's a much smaller version of these things, but you need to get the future leadership of the party, because I don't think our current leadership has got a very long shelf life at this point. So you need the future leadership to start practicing this and to start borrowing some of the shamelessness from Republicans, because they're going to need it going forward. We cannot
Mhm.
risk another kind of Biden-esque, we're turning the page on this, if we do manage to emerge in more or less one piece.
And not just practicing, auditioning.
Yep.
You will see like, okay, this person is the kind of person who you know you want to think, again, let's imagine a 2029 trifecta. Certainly not guaranteed, but the first opportunity that it's credible that you could be in that position. Who do you want as the Senate majority leader? Who's the kind of Senate majority leader who is probably going to do the things that any legislator needs to do, but when it comes to court reform, is going to say like, you know what? I know it's a big step. It's a big, you got to swallow hard, but if you don't vote for this, you will be cut off by all Democratic money sources, and this is just we're doing this, and it's too bad. This is what we're doing. Um, you need the auditions to who that person's going to be, and I have no idea who that person. Certainly not going to be Chuck Schumer. I don't think Chuck Schumer thing is going to be Chuck Schumer. It's going to be someone who is sort of probably in his or her second term now in the Senate, right? And you want a sense who's that, who has that in them, who can play that role. We'll see.
So, our last topic on the resistance beat is the Texas Democrats, right? Who broke quorum a few weeks ago by fleeing the state, to prevent, or at least slow, Abbott kind of getting through the gerrymandered Texas maps. They have since returned. And in a real just dystopian turn of events here, they were told they couldn't leave the state house, the chamber, um, if they didn't sign a permission slip that a police officer, member of law enforcement, can follow them around everywhere to make sure they come back to vote in the special session and don't break
Right,
quorum again.
right, right, right.
And only one of them didn't sign the slip, which, like, kudos to her. Nicole Collier, these are House representatives that this is happening to, who said, "Yeah, fuck no, I'm not signing that slip," and who has been living in the chamber ever since, sleeping there. There's
And so the point
bathrooms
is they
there.
won't let her leave
Yep, because she won't
unless she
sign her
signs. So
minder,
she's
her police
basically
minder
yeah, so
slip.
she's basically being held hostage. I mean,
Yeah,
it is. I mean, I guess this is an issue that uh, a legislative body is a little like a courtroom, in the sense of like, if the judge says you mouthed off to me, I'm putting you in jail. Judge can do that, right? And it's a little like that in a legislative body. So I guess that's the basis upon, that's the but I mean, what the fuck?
right.
Like, what the
And
actual fuck?
now, kind of buoyed, I think, by her stance, a bunch of her fellow Texas House Democrats have been coming back and
Or
ripping up their
unsigning?
permission
Oh,
slips.
right,
Yep.
right,
And
right, right,
and kind
right,
of joining her stand in there. Um, and here's the thing. I've seen some people kind of be like, well, what was the point of this? They were never going to be able to, like, not come home for 6 months or whatever
right,
until you
right,
run out
right,
the
right,
clock on
right,
the special
right,
session. And now she's, being held captive in the state house, but that is where they need her to be for the votes. Like, what's the point? And
right.
I think we a little bit need to shift our mindset. Like, when Democrats are so out of power, right? Both on the federal level and, in Texas as well, they were never going to be able to defeat the Texas gerrymander, right?
Yeah.
There's like
Yeah.
10 of them. Like, what are they going to do, right? They don't control any part of the state. The gerrymander is going to get worse, right? I mean, but what they can do, and this, kind of loops back to what we were talking about at the beginning of the episode, you can fight a messaging battle always, even
Yep.
if you don't have any actual power. And that's what they're doing, right? They fled the state. It got them a whole bunch of headlines. Like, it was another opportunity for 28 hopefuls to audition, right? Pritzker really put himself in the front of the line as being like, I'll provide lodging and kind of take care of you and everything. And
Mhm.
now they're back and now they're holding this woman hostage. And now that's a big story. And the other ones who are coming back are coming with tales of like the police following them through the grocery store while they tried to shop with their children, right? I mean, this stuff matters because normal people don't know what a gerrymander is and aren't paying attention to
Yeah.
it. And you need visceral, TV friendly, social media friendly stories to increase the salience and have this exit the bubble of people like us who have known what gerrymandering are, our whole adult lives, right? Like,
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
stuff is important, even if they are not in a position to meaningfully, defeat this action in this moment.
Yeah, I had, as I think a lot of people did, they fled, they went up to I guess they went to Illinois. There were all the stuff about the state saying they're going to get the FBI to all the kind of stuff. And then after about a week, I see headlines that are like, "Yeah, I think we've made our point. We're going back now." And I felt kind of like, guys, I mean, like, come on, man. Yeah, you probably can't stay there for like forever, but like what happened? Like, was that really we accomplished our goal? Like, not really. Like, this is a little low energy, but I do think, and I would have liked them to have stayed a little longer because,
Agreed.
because are they going to have the FBI come arrest them? I mean, there's so many constitutional issues. Put them to the test, basically. So I would have liked them to go longer, but I think the basic point is not a bad one. They put this at the center of the headlines, whereas no one gives a fuck or even understands what gerrymandering is, basically. So that is really important. And now Texas Republicans have done them the favor of creating a new spectacle. So, yeah, overall, I think that it has had a lot of purpose, and this goes to the general issue of Democrats' sort of news and policy literalism, that everything is about just the debate and the votes. No, it's not. It's about the public drama and the spectacle that people see and all that kind of stuff. So there's
Totally.
some signs of positivity on this some positive signs on this general front.
And the Texas Republicans doing them a favor, I think, is key because that is what authoritarians always do in every iteration. They overstep, they overreach, they're violent, they're brutal in a way that blows back on them, right? Like,
Hmm.
looping around to what you were saying about the kind of civil rights movement, the reason they were doing that really demonstrative nonviolence is because they knew the other side wouldn't be able to restrain themselves and would create, as you say, images of, police wailing on a guy who's just like standing there. And that helped their cause. That is what these people do. And in order to kind of lure them into acting that way, you have to keep attention on what's going on. So I totally agree with you that I wish Texas Democrats had stayed away a little bit longer and said, do it. Have guys in FBI windbreakers drag me out of Pritzker's Marriott or whatever. Like, let them do it. This kind of stuff does not play well with voters. They don't like it. Like, it makes them uncomfortable and uneasy. So I think, and that's why if they had just come back, like you said, after a week and everyone signs their little permission slips and they go about their life, this wouldn't have been a story. But because Nicole Collier said, fuck that, no, I'm staying in the state house, and now she's held hostage, and now everyone else is coming back. Now it's a story, and it's a story where Texas Republicans look fucking insane.
Yeah,
So it
totally.
demands a little more backbone than I think a lot of our politicians are used to, and a little bit of, in all honesty, like putting your body on the line, like being
Mhm,
willing to
mhm,
be arrested and being willing to roughed up. But every time they do that, it redounds to their benefit, right? It's Alex Padilla going to the Kristi Noem press conference and getting handcuffed on his stomach on the ground. Like
mhm.
that, those are tangible moments of what this administration is and what they're trying to do. And I think this is why we need braver Democrats, because every time we've had someone who's been willing to say, kind of, no, fuck that, I'm not going to be scared, it ends up with a really bad news cycle for Trump and, all his affiliated flunkies.
Yeah, and one additional point here I think that is important for people to understand or to think about is that if Trump were popular right now, if there weren't worries about the economy, economy's great, everybody's loving Trump, what Trump does. And let's say Democrats are still on the wrong side of public opinion and they're doing this stuff. In that context, people look at that stuff and say, like, ugh, whiners. How annoying. Like I hate that. Why the drama? But it's the reverse. And when you have a climate like you have right now, where Trump is unpopular, we're past the. I mean, he's underwater on every issue. He's not popular, and there's anxiety about the economy. When you have that, when you create these blowups, it's bad for the people in power because everybody's already not liking it. So they see all these incidents as, yeah, you're right. I don't like it either, or kind of like, yeah, this is the kind of drama that would happen under Trump. Everything gets put to that, to them because Trump's unpopular. His supporters are unpopular. So it is a climate. It's not that kind of just any random shit you do will work for you. But when the other guys are unpopular, it kind of is any random shit you do will work for you. So you have more leeway. So you should play into that.
Totally. Okay, so the last kind of things we want to talk about, we've talked about the gerrymander, but it is in this bucket with the various kind of efforts to just steal the midterms that Trump is being very kind of open about. So on the heels of the gerrymander thing, he had his little summit with Putin where Putin said, you know what, man, the reason you lost in 2020 was mail-in voting. That was really rigged. You would have won otherwise. So now Trump is like really obsessed with mail-in voting again. And he put out like a crazy truth social about how he's leading a movement against it. He's going to sign an executive order to get rid of it. And then he had his little Oval Office meeting with Zelensky where he said explicitly, you're not going to have a lot of Democrats elected when you don't have mail-in voting. So Republicans have to get smart about this. We have to get rid of it, right? Just as black and white as can be. And then also kind of mixed in with the truth social, he said he wants to get rid of voting machines. Even though everybody in the whole entire world keeps saying hand counts are less safe and less accurate. But, here we are. So it looks like he's going to mount this kind of mail in voting push again, which our listeners will know has been more or less a constant refrain from him for like a decade, with a really micro retreat in 2024 when his advisors were saying, like, dude, you might lose the election if none of our voters can vote by mail. So this is not a slam dunk, right? And he retreated off that. Republicans poured millions into kind of getting voters to believe it was unrigged, a safe way to vote again. And now he's just ripping all that up. And then, going on in the background, there's a case that's going to be argued at the Supreme Court in October where you've got a Republican congressman from Illinois and a couple presidential elector nominees who are trying to challenge Illinois' grace period for counting mail-in ballots postmarked by Election Day but received afterwards, which the case is just about if they have standing to kind of challenge that state law. But if the Supreme Court says, yes, you're going to have these challenges to all kinds of, blue state increased access to voting methods.
Mhm,
And
mhm.
then, and this is trickled down. You have some red states now who have taken away their own grace period for mail-in voting, who now it has to be by election day. That's, Kansas, Utah, and North Dakota have all done that already. So it's clearly, it's at the fore again. And he said in his little Zelensky quote that, something along the lines of like, redistricting can't even touch this. This is the main thing we have to focus on. So
It's almost like he's saying, like, don't think you're going to get more aid because I'm rigging the election against Democrats, so we're good. It's you got to work with me
exactly.
for the next 4 years. Yeah, I mean, it is. In addition to everything else, his whole thing with mail-in voting is so wild because it, it, Republicans have been very successful at getting their people to buy into it, and great, because at the end of the day, everybody should be able to vote. Great, that's great. Okay, and also, in addition to their people, they are now more dependent on your occasional voters. So, you know, so mail-in voting is great for them. I'll conclude on this point. Josh Shapiro, the governor of Pennsylvania, uh, I saw a headline in Philly Inquirer about this. In a way, it's just obvious and kind of whatever. But he did a press conference when he said, like, yeah, we don't give a crap about any executive order he's going to do about mail-in voting. Everything we do is going to stay the same. He has nothing to do with us. And to a great degree, all he was doing was just restating what the Constitution says, right? But it was so good that he said that, because people hear that and like, wow, I guess Trump's he says he can do an executive order and that's going to get rid of mail-in voting. The people in power need to say, no, not even close. Forget it. We don't give a crap about you, and to demonstrate that power. And again, it's almost like my own inner Democrat kind of says, well, he's just stating what we all know from the federal Constitution, Josh. So I mean, come on, this is truly redundant. We all have to resist our inner Democrat who thinks in such literal terms. Because, again, he is very hip to the fact that with these executive orders, they are just these constant performances of power, and creates this aura around him of his all powerfulness. And Democrats need to, people like me can say, well, again, the inner Democrat, well, in fact, an executive order is merely instructions to people in the federal government to enforce the law in certain ways. No one gives a crap about that. You need these kind of very public, very demonstrative demonstrations of power, because people don't read the fine print. Democrats read the fine print too much.
Totally. And I do want to just reiterate, despite what Vladimir is whispering into his ear, it's insane for Trump to get rid of mail-in voting, especially since, as you say, at least right now, we don't know how temporary this is, but like the core constituencies of the two parties have flipped. Like Democrats are now the party of the people who will do anything to vote, right?
Yeah.
Who, if there's something wrong with their ballot, they're going to fix it. They're going to vote early. They're going to track their ballot. Like they are now the party of civic responsibility. They will vote. And Trump is the party of, what was once considered the Obama coalition, people who fall out of the electorate, who don't vote
Mm-hmm.
very often, who kind of can
Mm-hmm.
only muster the energy or have the time to do it once in a while. And for those kind of people, hitting obstacles in the process to vote pretty much guarantees they are not going to do it, right? So you
Yep.
take away the grace periods, you take away mail-in ballot, all of a sudden you're leaving people with the option of, voting in person on a work day. And that's all
Yep.
you're going to leave them with. Like there's a reason that all the Republicans around Trump were like, "Hey, push the brakes on this
Ixnay on the
one."
mail-in voting rate. Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, listen, for all of you out there, again, we are back. Let me mention one thing. We actually, next week, we will be recording and publishing the podcast on Thursday. That's a one-time change, and that is for those of you who've been with the site for a long time. I'm sure many of you remember when my first son was born. I posted pictures of him when he was, when he was a little boy. He's going to college, so we're doing it one day later because my wife and our family is driving up to New England to have our son go to college, freshman year of
Woohoo.
college. Woohoo! But as we said at the beginning, we are back to our regular schedule again. There's occasionally we do a different day of the week, but we are back to our weekly. And I want to thank my co-host Kate for her perseverance and her being with us in all the ways that she is with us. And thank you again, listeners, for your patience. And I think that's all we got for today.
Yep. See you next week.
See you next week.
The Josh Marshall podcast is hosted by me, TPM reporter Kate Riga, and TPM founder, editor-in-chief Josh Marshall. The show is produced by Jackie Wilhelm. Thanks to Why Not Jansfeld for our podcast theme song, and thanks to all our TPM members who make this possible. Rate and review us on Apple Podcasts, and subscribe wherever you listen.